Hey, what's up, Canada and beyond? Happy Tuesday evening. I hope you guys are snuggled up nice and warm and having a beautiful day on a wonderful Tuesday evening, early evening. I guess still afternoon out west. So tonight we've got a special opportunity. We talk about within the community here an awful lot about the timing of things, about the wheels of justice move ever so much slower than the speed of reality, and we're not even going to get into the speed of science, but the speed of reality in life as we know it. Everything moves at a different pace, and one of the biggest things that's been on our mind over the last couple of years has been the level of censorship, abuse by the social media platforms all across North America specifically that we experience. And we hear a lot of discussion and a lot of talk about why isn't anybody fighting this? How can this be happening? What can we do about it? Well, tonight we're going to get a very special treat, and we're going to get to meet somebody that is doing something about it, Mr. Jason Fyk, who has been taking them to task in America for a lot of years now. Welcome to the show, Jason. It's an honor and a privilege to have you here. One of the things that strikes me the most in doing my research on what you're doing is that you found yourself on the steps of the nation's capital making a public announcement for the biggest case in America, and you were alone. And I feel the same way.
That's pretty much how it went down. Thanks for having me, Wayne. And what's up, Canada? Um, so yeah, we actually I stood up on the Capitol steps with Congressman Gohmert, and now this is only just one of two different cases that we have going on, but we filed a constitutional challenge of Section 230, which is the law in America that is allowing these companies to sort of get away with anything, all the publisher, stuff, and doing anything and everything that they want online. And when I say what just so you understand what a constitutional challenge is that I'm not suing Facebook or Google or Twitter. I'm not even really suing the government. I'm actually suing the law itself. So we're challenging the law and saying the law it is unconstitutional. And there's a lot of reasons why it is unconstitutional. But what was really unique about this is that, in my head, I thought to myself, well, it's global news. I mean, the fact that somebody's actually fully challenging the law now, you would think that somebody would, want to know. Well, we did this and we went up there and I sat, I stood there with a congressman, and the congressman said, he's right, and we're going to give him congressional amicus support, which means that they're going to file, supporting documents that agree with us. And not one single mainstream news network reported it. None.
Well, I can honestly say thank you to the fake news Mockingbird mercenaries, because that gives me the chance to hear it right from the horse's mouth. And this is what I'm finding in our space, is I've had the opportunity, because of what their abuse, to meet some of the most amazing people and give interviews to some of the most important information and events in our current times, and this is another opportunity of that, I guess a byproduct of their own abuse is their own self destruction throughout all of this. So I want to back it up a little bit here, Jason. Now, I also want everybody out there to give this a share, because the irony of this is of the highest magnitude. These guys are abusing us. They're going to censor us. And here we are using their platforms and tools to share with the world that abuse. So please give this a share, guys. But tell us a little bit for the community's sake out there, where you come from, and how you got to this place. They won't have had the opportunity to do the research that I have yet. And in all fairness, I had no idea who you were or what you were doing. But in your heyday, I knew exactly who you were and what you were doing. I loved your content. I saw your content all the time. So roll us back in time a little bit to where you started to see the breakdown, what you were doing at the time, and lead us through a little bit of that story because it's important to all of this.
Sure. So, um, predominantly, I worked on Facebook, right? I mean, almost exclusively because those were the heydays of Facebook, and it was about 2010 that I got started on there, and then in 2011, I started aggressively growing pages because I realized the value of distribution, right? Just it's effectively a very large distribution list is what you create by building out pages. And we did a lot of entertaining. We made memes and funny stuff, and and my one page, which was WTF magazine. Of course, everybody thinks that it means something, but it actually was Where's the Fun magazine. It was a play on the acronym, obviously, and that became the fifth most popular page on Facebook in those days. And that's this, it had 2 million fans, and but I had accumulated all sorts of other pages and some of the the biggest out there. And it's funny because I hear people today and they're like, oh, I have so many Instagram followers and whatever, and I'm like, well, I mean, like my best post got 168 million likes. Like,
It was so humbling listening to your story because I've done a lot of complaining about being removed with 20,000 followers, feeling like it's the end of my world. How
Mhm.
many did you lose?
So had happened over a series of different hits, but essentially what happened was I did an accounting in 2012, and I had 16.8 million at the time. And then it was around, I would say, beginning of 2014 January, where I get hit with the first one. And this is before most people even understood what being banned on Facebook was. I mean, we used to be subject to all sorts of weird stuff because we were so big. At that point, I had probably around 25 million fans, and they didn't unpublish or delete anything. In fact, what they did was they just cut the reach off. And I think everybody understands that at this point. But essentially, you don't lose the followers, you don't lose the page, but you lose the ability to connect with anybody. They just turn you down like a volume, just gone. And I went from making somewhere in the neighbor. I mean, at that point, I was advertising and marketing using the audience that I had. And I mean, we were doing 300 plus thousand a month, not a year, a month. And I mean, it was huge. The next month, 6,000. I mean, they shut me off like just done. So fast forward a bit more, and at our peak, I think I had built up almost 38 million fans. I mean, it was a huge audience because we did everything we could to bypass going around the algorithm restrictions and so forth. And then it was 2016, and coincidentally, just it was October 19th of 2016, and a lot of people know what those dates are. All of a sudden, overnight, six of my pages just shut off, unpublished. No reason, no warning. I didn't even get an email, right? They just shut off. Now, that's unpublished, right? That's not deleted, but they were just unpublished. Nobody could see them. And a couple months goes by, right? And it was about, I think it was January, February of 2017 when I reached out to an old colleague of mine, and we had done work in the past, and I had helped build him out of nothing. I mean, originally I was huge and helped him, and he was now doing 22 million in advertising. I mean, it was huge. He had Facebook reps that would come out to his business and everything else like that. And I said, hey, could you see if your reps would like turn my pages back on? Like see if they could republish them. And he said, sure. So he goes and he talks to them and he says, can you turn them back on? And Facebook came back to him and said, no, we can't turn it on for Jason. Sorry about that. But if you guys own it, we'll turn it back on for you. And I they came back to me with that, and I was like, are you freaking kidding me? So I sold them the pages, which of course, it's a fire sale. I mean, you're selling them for pennies on the dollar of what they're worth, but they're worth nothing if they're unpublished, right? They're gone. So I sold it to them, and sure enough, they inked the contracts, and 3 days later, poof, like magic, all of the offensive content that I had on there that got shut off was no longer offensive anymore because I turned it all back on again. Now the thing is, in this one, and this will be relevant to later. I'm going to ask you a very very simple question, Wayne. Who is the publisher of my content?
That should be you.
Right. So I'm the publisher, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Keep that in mind, and all your audience, keep that in mind. That you're not going to believe how minute the mistake was that screwed up almost all of the world in terms of social media, and it's predicated upon that one simple question. Who is the publisher of my content? I am the publisher of my content. Okay? The reason I say that is because in 2000, about 2 years later, I mean, it takes a while to get a lawsuit together, especially when you're about to take on one of the biggest companies in the world, backed by the United States government and working with the United States government, right? This
So
is
at this point, you're going after Facebook, right?
this is when we took a turn and we realized, because what they had done had nothing. Obviously, let me ask you this, just another very simple question: what of my content was in any way improper?
In America, nothing.
Well, the content that was shut down because it was improper, but turned back on and said that it was proper when it was in the hands of another person. Identify what content was then improper, because it can't be.
Yeah.
On its face, it had nothing to do with content, because it was identical content that was turned off, was turned back on. So it doesn't matter what it was not relevant. The content has nothing to do with the decision. It had to do with who made the more money. Okay? Very clear, you know? So those two things are the two important things to establish here. So then in 2018, we sued Facebook, right? And very few people were talking about it. I mean, I did get on Fox and Friends, and that was probably one of my worst interviews, but it was also my first on one of the top shows. Not realizing how to take advantage of a 5 minute segment, because it's very difficult to explain 2.5 decades of law that's screwed up in 5 minutes. Um,
I
so
I
we
I I just got to interject a little bit of levity there. I've only recently had my first experience on national broadcasting in a 6-minute segment, and they wanted me to condense, a 30-year multinational crime cabal syndicate and break it down to the nuts and bolts and identify the names in 6 minutes. So
yeah,
uh,
it's very
it's crazy.
difficult to do. Yeah, I mean,
It is.
if they go and, oh, Section 230 is bad. Okay, interview's over. I mean, what do they want me to say? So anyhow, we sued in 2018, and our allegation was very very simple. It was unfair competition, which is effectively, it's a tort, right? And then we had tortious interference, fraud, and extortion, and we went after them. And so we go into what is called the Northern District of California, right? Which this always gets dragged back to California because of foreign selection. It means that in their contract they say, well, you have to sue us in California. I wonder why. It's like home field advantage kind of stuff, right? And
California, Canada, same difference.
pretty much, pretty much. And I thought to myself, I was, of course, very green at the time, not realizing what I was quite up against. But I went in there thinking to myself, oh, there is going to be justice. These judges will do the right thing. No, not even close. All right. So this is what they said. Okay. So this is the Northern District of California's judge said that I was treating Facebook as a publisher, and that under Section 230C1, right now, for most people that don't know out there, it works like an outline. Statutes are written exactly like an outline. So you have Section 230C, and then there's C1, and then there's C2, and of course, then there'll be like C2A, C2B, that kind of thing. Okay. So they said they had Section 230C1 immunity because I was treating them as a publisher. Okay. Now, let me remind you, who was the publisher of my content?
You always.
Okay. So was I treating them as the publisher? If I was saying that they were unpublishing, republishing, soliciting a new owner, and so forth.
No, they're determining to do that themselves.
Right. I wasn't treating them as the publisher because I wasn't treating them as me, was I?
No,
Right.
exactly.
So I wasn't casting them in the same light as myself. That's how a defamation case works, right? I'm saying that they publish my content in their own speaking, meaning they are part of. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that no, they unpublished my stuff, they republished my stuff, they found a new owner, they did stuff that exceeded even the internet, right? These are meetings that were in on the phones and in person. So they said I was treating them as a publisher and they dismissed it. Well, you ready for me to give your community a revelation that will make everybody understand what just happened and why they screwed this up. And this is literally the origin problem for the entire mess on social media, at least in the United States. Obviously, it has ripple effects to other countries, as we were talking about. But you ready for this revelation? So, is there a difference between the word the and a?
Obviously.
There is. And you remember Bill Clinton said, it depends on what the definition of is.
Yeah. Trudeau says it like, well, we experience the truth differently.
Well, so here's the thing about it. The English language is very, very important, especially when writing laws and understanding laws. All right. And I'm going to show you where they made a mistake. The courts said I was treating them as a publisher of my content. I was, but I was not treating them as the publisher of my content. And the law specifically reads, no provider, user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. So in that English equation there, I am the publisher. I'm not treating them as myself of my content, which was by another. Correct? I was treating them as a secondary publisher. A secondary publisher. The difference between those two words is the is what's called a definite article. Okay. It defines who the publisher is. And it generally means we know who it is in the story, right? Go look it up. All I have to do is just literally look up what is the purpose of the word the. Okay. So in that equation, it says the publisher is another content provider. Well, I'm not treating them as me. I was treating them as A, which is an indefinite article, which means that it can be anybody. Now think about this. Now think about how the ramifications of this is this. One scenario is they can't be treated as whoever that publisher was. That's it. One person. That's it. If they can't be treated as a publisher for anything they do you see the problem?
Right.
That's virtual sovereign immunity from everything because they can't be treated as a publisher. End of story. That is where they screwed this up. Okay. And the thing is, we know that it's screwed up, because some of my opponents will say, well, that's what they intended to do. No, that doesn't really work because let me ask another, these are fairly easy questions because I've gotten this to the point where it's like, how can the judges really mess this up? So let me ask you another question. If you were considering what content to remove from your site, are you acting as a publisher?
No, you're acting as an editor at that point.
Well, is an editor not a publisher?
Um, yes and no. I guess from my perspective, as being an independent, I don't publish anything until the editor's done their job of changing anything. As the publisher, I publish what's given to me by the editor. The editor makes the changes. The publisher publishes.
But in that circumstance, if they're deciding whether to publish or not publish, they're a publisher, correct?
Yes.
That's whether to restrict it or to allow it, right? So
Yeah.
if they're and it's a by proxy situation, whereas if they're considering what to restrict by proxy, they're also deciding what to allow, right?
Right.
Well, the second portion, 230C2, says that it allows them to consider what to restrict. That means they're acting as a publisher.
Right.
So if you can't be treated under the first portion as a publisher in general, what use is the second part? That's like saying to somebody you can't drive, but you're allowed to make a right on red. If you can't drive in the first place, what's the point?
Right.
It creates what's called a redundancy. It's duplicative, right? It's a duplication. It's redundant protection that doesn't exist in correct statutory language, right? There's these things they're called canons of statutory construction. It's kind of like rules and the way that laws are built. So we had gone back to the physical structure, and we realized this judge is wrong. I mean, this what he's done here is he's turned it into a redundant protection, right?
Yeah,
So
an
that's what we said.
infinite loop of protection.
You just got it. You nailed it. It becomes an irreconcilable loop. There's no break in it. It just goes into everything, and everything's protected. It doesn't make any sense. So we went to the Ninth Circuit Court, which is a step up appeals court, right? Um, we said to them, hey, this can't be a publisher. Like, it just doesn't make any sense, because if you have absolute immunity from all publishing, now the courts even recognize, and they said it eliminates all distributor liability, even when they're knowingly distributing harmful content, right? Because that would eliminate everything. They could do anything they want. Well, there's a problem with that. Well, now we didn't bring it up in the Ninth Circuit, but Justice Clarence Thomas, right? Fairly smart guy. He brought
Mhm.
it up and he said, well, it's kind of odd that you would eliminate all distributor liability in 230C1, which means that you just can't be treated as a publisher, in the very same statute in which they implicitly impose it. Section 502 of the same statute says that it is unlawful to knowingly distribute third party unlawful child pornography. Holy cow. It literally conflicts with itself, right? So we brought this issue to the Ninth Circuit Court. We said it's redundant. Well, then the court decides to make it even worse. I'm going to walk everybody through this mess that we've had to deal with. It's so bizarre. Like, and if people just follow it, you'll understand. It's not that we're wrong. The court just won't do it. So we go to them and we say, hey, look, it's redundant. And the court says, no, it's not redundant. And we say, it is, because all publishing's covered. And they said, no. And this is an exact quote. They said, Section 230C2 is a separate shield of liability, quote, perhaps because they developed information even in part, end quote. Okay, ready for this? If you develop information, you decide what to edit, what to change, what to restrict, what to allow. Are you not still publishing?
Yes.
And, and you, what? Like, the Ninth Circuit Court said, no, it's a separate shield of liability just because you can't publish. It's totally separate, but it's publishing. And you go, you didn't resolve anything. You literally just gave me more publishing things. It's like sitting there saying, again, exactly like you can't drive. And they said, oh, well, I know you can make a right on red, but you can make a left on red too, and that's separate. And it's like, nope, that's still covered. So they didn't resolve anything. Resolve zero, right?
Yeah,
So then
addressing the moot law doesn't change the fact that it's still moot.
yeah, they didn't want to undo it. They didn't want to fix it, right? And that's really become apparent as we get further and further down the road. So I mean, I should have beaten dismissal right then and there, and there should have been, fireworks and yay, but nope, nope. I'm going for the long haul. So we go and we appealed en banc, which is the full Ninth Circuit, and they decided not to hear us there. And then we went to the Supreme Court the first time. And when we went to the Supreme Court, we said that this doesn't work. And, hey, look, this is a matter of national importance. You might want to look at this back in 2020. Do you think it's a matter of national importance now? We were just too far ahead of our time. So the Supreme Court denied our cert. Now, granted, there are three types of cases that the United States Supreme Court takes. One is a habeas corpus when somebody's on death row because a life is on the line. Okay. The second type is a constitutional challenge. Well, I already told you, I'm doing that already. That one's coming through the courts now. But there is a third type, which is what's called a circuit court conflict. When two different United States circuit courts of appeal have a conflict with one another, the only court that can resolve that conflict is the United States Supreme Court, the higher court, court of record, right? So, and that'll be important again down the road. Let me explain. So we go and we go, we gotten kicked out of the Supreme Court. They denied our cert, and we were like, I mean, that was a crushing blow, realistically, because I knew at that point this was going to dramatically affect my life financially because the courts just didn't do their job. In fact, they didn't even give me a single oral argument, meaning I never got in front of a judge, never saw a judge in my life. Not in this one. No, in my life, I shouldn't say that because I have in the past. Good things, hopefully. But the point was is that they never gave me a single hearing. You ever hear of this document? It's kind of an important document. It's called the United States Constitution. You heard of that?
Yeah, kind of a little bit familiar with that.
Yeah.
Probably a little
Canadians
bit
kind of
more
want
than
one too, right?
a lot of Americans are, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Out of
Canadian,
envy,
pretty
but
much everybody wants one of these documents, because
right,
it,
exactly.
yeah. And the thing about it is that they're not privileges, right? So there's a difference between a right and a privilege. A right is in the United States. I know that Canadians struggle with this, but I would argue that you all have human rights. That I don't care about the document necessarily so much as everybody has a right to speak. You have to fight for it, right? You have to fight for rights. Now, rights are ensured by our Constitution, meaning you already had them. They can't abridge them. They can't mess with them. End of story. But they have dumbed everybody down to accept because if you're complicit in it, oh well, if you want to walk to the slaughterhouse, that's on you. You know. So the thing is, you have to educate yourself. You have to understand what's going on, and that's all I did. Is I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I could smoke any lawyer in this nation, and I would welcome any debate with any of them. Why? Because I just went and learned it. I went back and I looked at everything and I read everything and I finally figured out how it works. Well, the thing is that they're violated my constitutional rights. Okay? Because I'm entitled. So when anybody takes something from me, my life, liberty, or property, right? Under the Fifth Amendment, I am entitled to my day in court. I'm entitled to it. It's a right. And I had never gotten a day in court, yet the United States gave the authority to these private companies, corporations. They're not totally private, they're actually corporations, right?
Mhm.
But they gave them the right to take my property and my liberty and then denied me a single day in court. It's a violation of my constitutional rights, which that's what bore the constitutional challenge. Is when they did that, they gave me what's called Article 3 standing to go and sue the United States itself. And that's what we are doing in the constitutional challenge, saying, you can't deny me of my rights. You don't have the jurisdiction to violate my constitutional rights. That as a person, as an individual private citizen, I have sovereign rights that you can't supersede. It's crazy. I mean, this is probably foreign territory for Canadians, literally and
Well,
figuratively.
yes and no, to an extent, because what you're dealing with here right now is like the poster child example of what the difference is between America and Canada. America being a constitutional republic and Canada actually being a democracy. And we're seeing this shift in America where all of the one certain demographic chooses to protect democracy. Democracy is under threat. Well, first of all, America isn't a democracy. A
No, it's
democracy
not.
is ruled by the mob. What they're trying to do is they are trying to rule a constitutional republic as if it were a democracy. This is, I feel, what you're experiencing is that rule of the mob. You're experiencing democracy in a place that's supposed to be ruled by the rule of law, the constitutional republic.
Do you know why that's important? You know what? Do you want a really good way and analogous to understand democracy versus a constitutional republic? For those of you out there that might just want it simplified, a lynch mob, right? That goes out Wild West and says, "Hey, you stole my cow," and the crowd goes, "Yeah, you stole the cow," and then they hang him from a tree and they kill him. That's democracy. That's
Yep.
ruled by mob. The thing is,
It-
what if that guy wasn't actually the guy who did it? See, that's how a constitutional republic works. It says you're innocent until proven guilty. It means we don't care that the mob is angry at you. We will give you your day in court to fight for what you are entitled to, due process. And that's the difference here is we're saying, hey, we are still a constitutional republic here, judge. We are entitled to our due process rights, and you denied me of that. So we're holding them accountable for having done that to me. That's our plan here.
Exactly. Again, it's just such a glaring example of the difference. Here in Canada, we are literally ruled by the lynch mob. If you are not politically reliable, you are executed in the digital space first, and you are removed, you are canceled. That is lynch mob governance. Whereas in America, you have that right to free speech. Whereas in Canada, they think that our rights are granted. We don't have any actual rights in Canada. The state grants us the right. This. Which ultimately leaves us nothing more that is then free range humans on living on a tax farm here in Canada, at the behest of the lynch mob and whatever flavor of emotion that they have on any given day. This is why what you guys are doing, or what you're doing, literally taking on the entire United States of America, to help us understand this, is absolutely the biggest case in America.
Well, you nailed it there, and that is something that a lot of people get confused about, is the difference between rights and privileges. In Canada, everything is a privilege, under their rule. Ours is ensured by it's not even that the Constitution grants us the rights. The rights are already assured. In fact, the irony is that word "the" that I was talking about, and how important it is. Do you know that James Madison himself actually argued that the most important word in the right to free speech is the word "the," because it indicates that it already existed prior to any potential abridgment. I mean, it was already there.
The
That's the point.
recognition of the supremacy of God would be very different than a recognition of the supremacy of God.
Exactly. Very. The words matter, right? The words, the
100%.
diction matters a lot. So, what happened next? This is where things start getting really crazy. So there's this other case, just as we're sort of about to file in the Supreme Court. I mean, we were literally ready to file the Supreme Court cert, and this other case comes along, Enigma versus Malwarebytes. And a lot of people were talking about that because it was a very strange case. And the same court that I was dealing with, the Ninth Circuit Court, had rendered a decision overturning the Northern District Court, and said that, and I quote, the Good Samaritan general provision of the Communications Decency Act, the same one I'm talking about here, Section 230, does not immunize anti competitive blocking and screening. That was my exact cause of action. I mean, exact, under the same statute. And we're like, see, I told you so. So we included it. Literally, we waited a few days. It took us a few extra days, but I think it was 19 days later, we brought that to the Supreme Court and said, "Hey, look, your Enigma decision." And what they had done is they denied cert, but in doing so, they affirmed the Ninth Circuit's decision, and it became controlling law, meaning it is done, it is settled. And we essentially went to the Supreme Court and said, "Hey, we got a conflict here because the Ninth Circuit's conflicting with the Ninth Circuit." Well, remember I said it was going to be important to talk about circuit court conflicts? This wasn't a circuit court conflict. This was an internal circuit conflict. It didn't conflict with another court. It conflicted with itself. Well, here's the thing. If you're conflicting with yourself, the Supreme Court is not really that inclined to deal with it, because they go, fix it yourself, right?
You
Go
can't be
fix your
lying
own
and tell the
problem,
truth
Ninth
at the
Circuit.
same time.
Right. So the Ninth Circuit should have dealt with this. So they denied us cert, and we moved ahead. What do we do next? Well, we file what's called a motion 60B, which is a motion to consider overriding an original judgment because there's a change in law. Well, there was a change in law. They literally said that the Good Samaritan general provision does what they did to me. So now here, let me ask you something. If it's a general provision of the statute, do you think it applies to only one part of it, or do you think it applies generally?
Generally is kind of the umbrella term there to be inclusive.
Yeah. Yeah. You would think it would apply generally. And I mean, I'm asking these really dumb questions because
I mean, I didn't say
these are the things that
specifically.
judges cannot understand. So here's what we said. We said, okay, now where did they pull that from? The Good Samaritan general provision. Well, Section 230C. So this is the header, the title for C1 and C2. Everything we're talking about here falls under this. So it literally, it precedes them, and it says protection for, quote, Good Samaritan blocking and screening of offensive materials. The Good Samaritan is in quotes, and there's a reason it's in quotes, because its formal name, it can be called a general provision, but its formal name is called an intelligible principle. It's an easily understood principle when administrative delegations of authority are granted to a commission. In other words, these private agencies are commissions. They're agents of the government, no matter what. It's in quotes because they do what's called articulating. It means it's spoken, right? Well, if 230C says that you have to be a good Samaritan, you would assume that applies to 230C1 and C2, correct?
You'd think,
Makes
generally.
sense. So we go to the back to the Northern District Court, and the judge says, oh, no. You're dismissed again because Enigma considered 230C2 and your case considered 230C1. Dismissed. Except they may have considered 230C2, but the determination was the general provision, which overrides all of it. It applies generally. And it was like, huh? How on earth can you screw that up? So, what happened next? Well, we go back to the Ninth Circuit for the second time, and we say, have you ever heard of something called the whole text harmonious canon? Right? Actually, it's two canons technically. And what that means is that the rules to build a law says that you have to read the law as a whole in general. And the second thing is it has to be harmonious, meaning it has to make sense. It can't be redundant or duplicative, right? So now you've got 230C conflicts with 230C1. 230C1 swallows 230C2. This is the stupidity of this mess, right? And we said it doesn't fit. And then we said, well, the intelligible principle, which of course, remember, is its formal name, right? As we're going through the Ninth Circuit Court, another case, and it was Jarkesi versus the SEC, determined that if the statute doesn't have an intelligible principle, it's unconstitutional. So we said to the court, the intelligible principle applies to the whole statute. I should beat dismissal. And if it's not the intelligible principle, it's unconstitutional. I should beat dismissal. It was a catch-22. We flat out had them locked in place. So you know what the Ninth Circuit Court did? This is great. They said, you're dismissed on a discretionary procedural, and said we didn't file within a reasonable time. Now, remember something. It became settled law October 13th, and we filed 19 days later in the Supreme Court. And then when the Supreme Court denied us, 2.5 months later, we were back in the Northern District of California, and they related it all the way back to the first determination a year and a half earlier, which then went immediately into an appeal and was in what's called interlocutories for almost a year, back and forth, back and forth. How do you use a law that's in appeal? Not only that, but it wasn't even published most of that time, meaning they screwed me deliberately. Like, there's no more ands, ifs, or buts about it. They did it because here's the other kicker. Do you know that Facebook never argued timeliness? Neither did the Northern District Court. So they pulled this out of thin air. They actually pulled it out of smelly air. You know where that comes from, right? They pulled that out of nowhere just to blow me out again. And I'm going, okay, we got a problem here. Like, this is really messed up. So we filed what's called a motion for reconsideration. We went back at them and said, are you kidding me on the schedule thing? Reasonable time. How was it not? We were working nonstop. And part of the reasonable time issue is that somehow it prejudices the defendant. We've been in court with them nonstop. There was no change. There was no nothing. We've been suing them nonstop for 3.5 years, 4 years almost, right? So we went back at them and said, look at this timeline again. Are you freaking kidding me? And oh, by the way, you remember what those 3 supplemental filings. Now, what a supplemental is when another case conflicts as well. If you're in the process of a 60B, you file it supplementally, meaning you just fire it off to the court and say, hey, look, this conflicts as well and supports our argument. This conflicts, supports our argument. Well, we did that 3 times within days of those decisions, meaning those were not untimely. And yet they still undermine my case. They are essentially saying they're untimely when they're not. And not only that, now here's the craziest. This is the craziest part, and this is where everybody this is probably some of the biggest news in the nation right now, and nobody's talking about it yet, and you're going to hear it here very, very early on. So November 2nd, we file this motion for reconsideration, this November 2nd, right? November 3rd, a decision came out of the Fourth Circuit Court, not the Ninth Circuit anymore. The Fourth Circuit Court made a decision, and that decision changed everything. I found out about it November 4th. The 5th and 6th was the weekend. The 7th, we filed a supplemental, right? We threw it right back at the court and said, hey, look, you need to look at this Henderson versus private data out of the Fourth Circuit Court. So let me give you a little bit of background on how important this case is. This is big stuff here, right? The original case that got this wrong was Zoran versus America Online. It was the first case that was ever decided, and guess which court it was decided by? The Fourth Circuit Court. This was 26 years ago, okay?
Wow.
And that court read it wrong and read it within the purpose and policy. They said, well, Congress wanted to eliminate all distributor liability. No, they did not. And they said, and I quote, it said, it protects 230C1. Again, the one I'm talking about is you can't drive, right? It's the general, you can't be treated as a publisher, right? They said it shields from 230C1 shields from liability all publication decisions, whether to edit, remove, or to allow content. Summarizing it. Well, that's all publishing, right? Except 230C1 is about removing content, so it's still redundant, right? Believe it or not, and we have said this for 4 solid years, we said not only does it not cover all publishing decisions, 230C1 doesn't apply to any publishing decisions. It's when they're not the publisher. When the publisher is someone else, they can't be treated as someone else simply because their service, the hosting platform, is doing it. Because technically they're still a publisher, right? Because a platform is a publishing platform, but they're not doing it, right? It's like a passive version of publishing. This is where it gets all confusing because like, oh, they're publishers in all scenarios, and they're service providers in all scenarios. The question is, did they actively do any publishing or did they not? The differences between passive hosting and active content moderation, right? Well, go ahead.
It's a license to print money when they're selling that space for advertising.
Well, if they can come in and they can do any publishing they want, everything's immune. Everything, literally everything. So what happened here is that all was predicated out of Zoran versus America Online. Well, the Fourth Circuit Court did something that the Ninth Circuit Court just simply wouldn't do for us. They considered the statute what's called de novo, means anew. They started all over again, which is exactly what I did. I didn't go back and look at bad precedent. I looked at how the law was structured, how it works constitutionally, how it's supposed to be built, and I looked at it for what it is rather than looking at the bad precedent that had been set. Well, the Fourth Circuit Court just undid. They literally undid their own precedent. It's amazing. So everything everybody has based this upon, all of the precedent that has been bad, that relied on this Zoran versus America Online. I mean, out of 500 cases, 98 use it. They cite it. Okay? So a good 20% of them cite it. The court turned around. I'm going to read you a couple passages, just 4 different passages from this thing to understand exactly what they've done here. The Fourth Circuit Court said, quote, yet Zoran's list of protected functions, now this is what does 230C1 protect, okay, must be read in its context. Context is important. And that context cabins that list to merely editorial functions. Well, now that sounds like publishing again, right? Nope, they clarified it. It cannot be stretched to include actions that go beyond formatting or procedural alterations. That's passive hosting functions. That's the service. and change the substance of the content altered, which would be content moderation. They split 230C1 as essentially platform protections when it's only doing formatting and procedural alteration publishing, meaning they're not involved in it. It's the sites doing it, right? Now, another thing they clarified, an interactive computer service provider becomes an information content provider whenever their actions, again, there's that word actions and passive are different, when their actions cross the line into substantively altering the content at issue in ways that make it unlawful. So when Facebook took my content down for its own financial gain, then solicited a new owner of that content, and then put together a quid pro quo agreement that if they owned it, they would reinstate it because they would make more money out of advertising, did they or did they not substantively alter the content and made it unlawful? It's clear as day. And they said, no, that's not covered under C1 anymore. In fact, they went on to say, Zoran then said that Section 230C1 prevents suits that, quote, cast the defendant in the same position as the party who originally posted the offensive messages. In other words, the publisher. I was not casting Facebook in the position of myself. That makes no sense whatsoever, right? So they've now cleared this thing up. And the last one is even better, okay? I think that I set this all up so we can unwind this. This is great stuff here, right? They said, quote, thus for Section 230C1 protection to even apply, I threw an even there, but to apply, we require, it's required, that the liability attached to the defendant on account of some improper content within their publication. All right, Wayne, tell me again what content of mine was improper.
None of it. Nothing.
So if there's no improper content and I'm not treating Facebook as myself, and they've done far more than just simply provide a service that formats or the basic functionality of a service, C1 doesn't apply. The Fourth Circuit Court just realigned Section 230C1 with its original intent and its actual textual interpretation. Everything we've said for 4 years was just vindicated. We're right, Wayne. Everybody has said we're wrong and that we're out of our minds. We're right. We got it. Now, the cool part is this, and this is the big announcement for everybody else. Now, I have the constitutional challenge, sure, but we're now just done with the Ninth Circuit Court. You know what my next step is, right? United States Supreme Court. But this time I'm coming back with them, and I'm going, wait a second. Not only does Enigma conflict with my case, and the Ninth Circuit Court and the California courts didn't want to deal with it, hey, we also threw this Henderson case at them that undermines everything they've said and everything these courts have done for the past 26 years. They undid everything. And now I have a conflict between the Ninth Circuit and the Fourth Circuit, meaning I not only have a constitutional challenge coming, I've got a circuit court conflict going in the United States Supreme Court. It's
Uh-oh. I hope that's just a temporary glitch. Hopefully he makes it right back here.
Did that really just happen?
They're listening. I'm telling you, Jason.
Oh my Lord. That was like, what just happened? Because we both cut out. Oh my God. That was so crazy.
Try that again.
Where did you lose it?
It was after. Now you've got the conflict and the Supreme Court.
Wow. Biggest announcement I got to make. And it cuts out. I mean, does that tell you something? So, and if it does it again, yep. All right. So, what we've got now as we head into the United States Supreme Court is that we have a conflict between the Ninth Circuit Court's decision and the Fourth Circuit Court's decision. And the irony is the Ninth Circuit is relying on the Fourth Circuit's decision that they just undid. They literally undid what they were relying on in the first place, which means that we now have a scenario where we can actually beat this, because we not only have the constitutional challenge, we have a circuit court conflict going in the United States Supreme Court and saying, hey, look, we got a problem, and and if I was Supreme Court, I'd be angry because the Ninth Circuit could have fixed this a long time ago. They chose not to. They really have screwed America. And that's where a lot of this problem relies, is that the courts wouldn't do it. What does that mean? It means that they're going to start undoing Section 230, and they're going to start being liable for what they do. That's it. That's what's
That
going to happen.
sounds to me like there's 26 years worth of judgments that are going to get revisited by some lawyers wanting a whole lot of money.
That is the unfortunate part of what they have reaped upon their self, because they said, oh, well, we're going to be undoing all sorts of. That's your fault. That's the court's fault. They did it. They should have fixed this a long time ago, and that was their job. I mean, and that's the point at which we're at now with the courts, is we're saying, we said to the Ninth Circuit very, very clearly and publicly, take due care that you are violating my constitutional rights. And this is not negligence anymore. This is a willful neglect for your oath to the Constitution, meaning you're not doing your job and you're willfully doing that. That's very different, because there is certain ways to deal with judges that will not, respect the constitutional oaths. So we've made it well known to to the Ninth Circuit, the Supreme Court. We're going to be filing affidavits there. I've got a lot of people backing me now, congressional members that are helping, and we're trying to get this done. But and something I want to say, because I know we're sort of coming up on the top of the hour, and that was a lot of information to throw at you all, but I hope you all followed. This is important stuff, right? It's complicated. This is what we figured out, but we can win this now. We have legitimately come from the back of the pack in this horse race, and we are 2 or 3 steps away from winning it. Okay. So this is expensive. Lawyers, for years, I've had to do this. We aren't quitting. We can undo this thing. If we do this, this will have ripple effects, obviously, to Canada as well, because, I think the whole world knows. I mean, even we know we are the pillar of freedom. If we fall, everything collapses. It is over for everybody in the world. And we are fighting tooth and nail over here, because, I mean, I would have never, when I grew up, I thought to myself, this is the greatest place on earth. I would have never thought that they would ever make moves like this to destroy our basic human freedoms. They're trying to take everything. So if you can, if you're in a position and you want to help, this is legitimately going to help the world. Go to socialmediafreedom.org. Educate yourself. There's a lot of information in there. We've been saying this for years. We have it all. We have it worked out. They don't want you to know about me because, of course, we're doing the job. We're working hard to get this thing done. If you can contribute, please do, because this is what keeps, this fight going into the Supreme Court is going to be 70 grand, give or take. This is not a cheap fight. So I'm here fighting for everybody else like that. I need help from everybody if we want to continue to have our freedoms, at least online.
Everything that you've given us here in the last hour, Jason, is so to me, it's inspiring, and I hope the underneath of all of this, the one thing that everybody grasps is that one person can make a difference. That doesn't mean we're all have to be you, but we can all take part in somebody's fight like you are doing that can change the world. One person can change the world. Sometimes they just need the rest of us to push them, to the place where they can make that difference. And what you're doing, I think, really addresses so many of the questions that people, primarily, I hate to use the word Western world, but the free market societies have been questioning and wondering and dealing with the repercussions of all of this. And when I talk about houses of cards coming apart, this is where you're at. You are at the finish line where these guys now can no longer kick the can down the road. They have to fix the problem, and that house of cards is going to come apart. And this was what I started to really be excited and afraid about, was as I started to understand what you're engaged in here, why we're seeing this exodus from Silicon Valley, why Facebook stocks are tanking, why the social media platforms, their investors, their developments, everything is running for the hills right now in Silicon Valley, and I think it's in large part because of what you've done.
Well, think about it. We filed a constitutional challenge. They changed their name to Meta to set up a corporate veil, and then they supposedly lost $700 billion in Meta. Lost, or embezzled? Because how do you lose $700 billion on a virtual reality site? It doesn't cost that much. So where did it go? What I think is happening is they're moving their money. This is how I see it happening right now because they know I'm coming. I'm persistent, right? They know I'm right. They've known I'm right for a while now, right?
They thought lawfare would bleed you dry and you would
Right.
quit.
And I think that the Supreme Court has recognized it. And well, let me first say this: the Meta is essentially a way to move the money out so that because Facebook is going to end up going bankrupt at the end of this because if we punch through, it's responsible for everything it did. End of story. It's going to get sued into bankruptcy. So are the giants. I mean, this is the apocalypse coming, right? And they don't want me. Obviously, I am a very happy person. I'm not suicidal. It's a dangerous world that I'm in, and the more attention that I get, the more protected I am against these guys, right? But the reality here is that the United States Supreme Court, I think that the leftists made a huge mistake. They threatened the United States Supreme Court with packing them out, right? And if you're sitting in 1/3 of the United States branch of government and you're told by another branch that, hey, we're going to dilute your power, wouldn't you knock their power out from under them? Especially if you could do it constitutionally. So the decision that the Supreme Court is going to have to make here, and this is one that clearly the Ninth Circuit made, that it doesn't care about rights or justice. They care about blowing this out for their big tech, allies apparently out there. Well, the United States Supreme Court is going to be faced with the same thing. Do our constitutional rights matter more than Silicon Valley? Because that's what's on the line here. We're saying that this law is unconstitutional. It denies everybody of their due process rights, and that it can't be this way because you have to be able to seek redress for the harms and grievances that are brought against you. We can't do that if we can never get a day in court. And it's ridiculous how bad this is because they haven't yet made a single cogent argument that makes any sense. So we'll stay at it for sure.
Well, I think that this is they see their days are numbered and limited, and they have had it. They've had complete control through this perpetual cycle, where they have uh, basically been choosing who got to profit from the tools, and they've been lining their pockets and controlling the narrative and using that to all kinds of nefarious goals and objectives, and the manipulation of politics through the manipulation of culture is what is threatening us as as an entire society right now, and it all comes down to they set themselves up to be able to do this through this technology, and now they're going to have to pay the piper on it.
Unfortunately, they're going to get caught for what they do. I mean, I don't. It's inevitable because there's too many of us. I mean, like Eric Schmidt and Jeff Landry, the attorney generals that are coming after. They sue the Biden administration and they're showing the connections. This is going to happen. This is going to end. And a lot of the legislation that's being proposed. I mean, I'm in the thick of that fight too. We've actually, I even redrafted Section 230 so that it would work correctly and apply in the courts correctly. That's called the Online Freedom Act. It's designed specifically to fix this mess. And I read other legislation, and I mean, it's garbage. I mean,
So you're
there's no other way to put it but garbage.
just to clarify for the people that are tuned in, you're actually helping with the development of fair and legitimate legislation. This isn't just a court case that you're involved in. Uh,
Exactly. I pivoted off with a judicial approach on this thing, and I was asked. What ended up happening is I was asked to look at legislation based on what I knew, because word is now spreading that we knew what we were talking about. We've been right all along, and that edification has put me at the forefront. Well, I was asked to look at legislation, and I mean, essentially, when I looked at it, I was like, nope, this isn't going to work. Like, not at all. and they then requisitioned me to go in, and I spent 5 or 6 months redrafting it. It's actually available on the website socialmediafreedom.org, the Online Freedom Act. And not only did I rewrite the legislation in there, I didn't just rewrite it. I put a summary as to what it does. So unlike most other legislation where they just throw stuff at a wall and hope for the best, I actually explain what every single thing does and what it fixes and why it fixes it, so that there's complete transparency as to what and how it works.
Well, you have definitely given us a drink from the fire hose tonight, Jason.
Followed by a chaser.
Well, it's interesting to me how and I don't know if people put enough stock and understanding in that is you become the expert for a reason, because you do the work, and you take it apart piece by piece by piece and understand it, and at the end of the day you are the foremost expert on this breakdown in American law that's been going on for 30 years. And wow, it's amazing to me that you have been able to withstand and have the fortitude to still be standing, taking on the entire complex that is the United States of America. That is a true testament, my friend. I am honored and
Thank you.
privileged to have you here sharing this with us, because there's a lot of wars going on right now, a lot of battlefronts, and what you're engaged in is a cornerstone to that they've been able to wage against us for 10 years. And I don't think people realize what it would look like if once this is fixed, we would live in a very different world uh, if uh, if this kind of influence and power had not been waged throughout the last 10 years of elections. What would our world look like right now? So the ripple effects of what they've been able to do, we can't undo all of that, but
Yep.
you're taking this to a point where we can stop it.
Yeah, we
And
can pivot for the future, because and what I like to tell people is, and it's just another simple question: do you know when the truth doesn't matter? There's a real answer to it. Do you know when the truth does not matter? When no one hears it.
yeah. So,
There's your internet for you. If nobody hears the truth, it doesn't matter about election integrity. It doesn't matter about the stickies, the jabby jabs. It doesn't matter if nobody knows. That's why this is a key fight, because we're trying to restore that voice, is the truth, is to be able to get that out there and not let them this stop us. And realistically, yes, is there misinformation out there? It is. But we should be entitled to all of the information to make the decision for ourselves. That's it. Not restrict what they want, or based on their agendas. Give us all of it. Let me make the decision.
100%. Yeah. And that, I could probably really go into the weeds with you on some of that
We
for a
could.
couple
We
of
could go on
hours,
for a
I'm
long
sure.
time. Yeah, sure.
But I want to be very conscious and grateful. I'm grateful for your time already, and I'd like to invite you back for any updates that you have, because in my book, even though I'm up here in Canada, we look to people like you that are the real heroes in some of these things that nobody would have ever heard or known about.
Nope.
uh, and you guys, you're in this case making some of the most important headway in literally the freedom for the entire free world as we know it, because we can't imagine, anybody born after 1982 cannot imagine or conceive a world that doesn't look like it is right now. And where that's going, if this isn't repaired, is very ominous and dark and gloomy. So very grateful for your fight, sir, and anything that we can do to help, any message anytime, it's an open platform for you. And I'll probably be passing you off to a lot of people that will love to hear from you as well. So I hope that
Yeah.
we can make an impact and get you some of the attention that this deserves.
I would even say that to your community as well, your audience. If you have, podcasters or something like this, I'm not above working with anybody because the message needs to get out there. And Anita, I got to say thank you, because this is not BS. This is legit. We are full blown in this battle, trying to win it, and the message needs to get around. It needs to get out there because it is very important. But thank you, Wayne, for having us on. And I would also say this is, since Twitter seems to be functioning a little better with Elon, you can find me on there. My name is Jason, Jason. My last name is F as in Frank, YK. You can search for me on there and I believe find me. But Jason Fyk. Come see me on, Twitter. I put a lot of the announcements out. I mean, I'm amazed I'm still on Facebook in general, but they've pretty much taken everything from me at this point. But yeah, that's the way to stay informed on this for sure, and hopefully we'll get some of the bigger shows looking at this very, very soon.
Well, your name is going to be going out across our networks up here. I am probably one of the most heavily censored in Canada right now.
That's a badge of
And
honor.
it is.
Badge of
It
honor these days.
truly is. They don't like it. Our national broadcaster up here, CBC, it typically spends about $3 billion a year of taxpayers' money, and they don't like it when I get half of the engagement that they do out of a completely organic channel that has never spent a dime in advertising on any of the platforms. But they do their best to keep me silenced. I still haven't gotten my Twitter account back. I'm gonna have to talk to Elon about that, but it doesn't seem to be very.
Elon. I need to talk to Elon. That's
Yes,
somebody I
you
really need to talk to.
talk to.
Kanye, or a couple other ones. Yeah, I mean,
Well,
Andrew Tate. There's another one I need to speak with.
it's interesting. They might be able to censor me, but they don't know who my friends are, and we've got friends that got friends in all kinds of places. So I wish you luck, and I look forward to having you back again with some updates sometime soon, and maybe we'll have a grumpy old men session and just talk about hypotheticals and speculations and have some fun one of these nights. So thanks again so much, Jason.
Thank you, Wayne.
My pleasure. All right, guys, that was definitely like taking a drink from a fire hose. I'm going to have to go back and rewatch this a couple of times myself, I'm pretty sure. Just too much goodness and interesting stuff on that note. So in one of the things that we wanted to do was to announce a new t-shirt line in commemoration of the fight that we are in. It is a new t-shirt on our new shop. Look for some new updates on there, some new gear. A true patriot will defend his country from its government. I don't think that there's anything more appropriate. Sorry about that, Rosanna. I don't think Facebook's really going to like this one getting shared out very much, but I appreciate you guys tuning in. We will do whatever we can to get it out through other means. And if there's updates on this, we will happily bring them to everybody. And on that note, wow, this is probably one of the most important interviews I've ever had the opportunity and the privilege of doing. I'm grateful that I'm in a position to do these kinds of things, guys. This is what I live for. This is what I eat, sleep, and breathe for. And this shows the power of what independent journalism really represents. And we need to do this together. We are 100% dependent on you guys, and your donations are the only way that we can keep going, as tough as it is. But this is what we've got to do, because we know for all the billions the legacy media spends, they're never going to tell you the truth. Like, you just got it right from the horse's mouth from Jason and yours truly here this afternoon. So on that note, just a little bit of housekeeping for y'all. If anybody wants to help us, buy us a coffee, or help us launch something that we're working on, just to keep the lights going. It's been very slim pickings the last little while. We're graduating from craft dinner to Ichiban. So if you can help us out, that's where you do it. And I just showed you one of our new t-shirt designs. And on that note, I love you all. Stay Canadian. Stay in the fight. Stay strong. Know that one person absolutely can make a difference. And if you don't think that is you, help somebody like Jason or your friendly neighborhood journalist. Love you all. Stay Canadian. Let's make Canada Canada again. Bye for now. God bless.